Yeah, God.
Isn't that good? Such an honor for us to be here with you. It's almost 18 months, or perhaps more than 18 months that we've last been here. And it literally feels like yesterday. Eternity gives such context even to our fragile time schedules. You know, we count down days, and the next moment the days have come and gone. But here we are, forever in I am. And the I amness of this moment gives such substance to our being together. I thank God for technology. Had it not been for technology, I'm sure we wouldn't have met at this point. And here we are, Facebook friends, and we connected. And we're 9 hours ahead of you in South Africa, and you're not going to catch up. You know? But in another context, we're not even a fraction ahead of you, because we're so one. And I thank God that He did make the planet round and not flat. And that we can discover in this context of earth dwelling in skin suits, we can discover the largest context of eternity. You know, when the scripture declares that the heavens cannot measure His greatness, you know, the expanse cannot even begin to define Him. Light years would struggle, you know. I mean, we could go where our minds go totally blurry in terms of light years to find context for the Creator. And then Paul sees Him like John did, and he sees the fullness, the completeness of deity dwelling comfortably in human form. That here God has within us the very perimeters, the very fullness of His being. You see, the danger has never been that we could exaggerate grace. I hear people warn against extreme grace. I mean, how extreme can you go in this romance? It has always been to underestimate. And to underestimate the fact that God saw enough in the one, that He pursued the one until He found it. Until He found it. There was no hint of God quitting on His pursuing us. We are so found. If we can invent tracking devices so that what is precious can be found again. Especially in South Africa, I mean, tracking, you hardly find a vehicle today that doesn't have a tracking device installed, so that if it gets stolen, you know, there's a little link with a satellite, and you can Google it. You can find your vehicle again. Might be lost for a moment, but while it's on planet Earth, it will be found again. Now, if we can develop technology, because we don't want to lose things, you think God is ever going to quit? I'm saying, well, you've got 99, so you'll just let go of the one. He pursues the one. He pursues the one to accentuate the value that He sees in the individual.
Such a good word.
And it's in the discovery of my individual value that I'm wrecked, that I'm overwhelmed. It's almost hard to read the law and see Jesus conclude in summary that equal to loving God. I mean, we could still, in principle, agree that one should love God. You know, one should love your Creator with all your heart. That means 100%. All your mind, all your strength. I mean, that it sounds good. I know we can't do it, but it sounds right. But then Jesus goes and blows us away when He says, and equal to this. Not inferior. Equal to this. He's loving your neighbor as you love God. No. You should love yourself. You see, you cannot escape the picture. You cannot leave the room. Because this gospel includes you. You make this gospel perfect. I mean, the shepherd can be whoever he is in that picture. But the one lost sheep makes the picture perfect. we could never again see this world through any other eyes, but to see God's audience in the one, to see what He sees, because it's only then when we can begin to echo what Paul saw when he speaks in 2 Corinthians 5:16 about this from now on therefore moment. You see, there is a from now on therefore moment in the dynamic of the gospel that forever changes your perception. Suddenly everything that I thought I knew about another previously becomes absolutely irrelevant, totally insignificant, because there's a from now on therefore significance that ignites my understanding. That's in 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 16. That ignites my understanding with a reference that carries more weight than any previous disappointment or moment of celebration where you've really done something to impress me, or perhaps done something to depress me. But there's a from now on moment in the gospel that is just so absolutely relevant. Because that's where you discover who you are. You cannot even begin to attempt to be nice to your neighbor unless you want to fake it until you discover a reference. And where do we discover the reference? In our best attempt to improve our conduct, to become a better person, or when we discover how loved we are. He first loved us, remember. We are the object of His thought. He is mindful of you. You engaged the thought of your Maker. Not because of something brilliant you did or didn't do, but because He knows you better than what you know yourself. He says, I've known you before I formed you in your mother's womb. You see, there is a knowledge of you that predates you, predates your natural birth, predates your conception. You have always been known. And such knowledge is too wonderful, says David. He says, how can we comprehend that God knew my unformed substance when there was absolutely nothing cute about me? And then he gives such context to the image and the likeness language of Scripture. We will discover a God who has no other agenda. He doesn't have a dark side that he has to defend and justify. He is only light. He is only what we see in His Son. There is nothing more about God than what is evident in His Son, Jesus Christ. Jesus is not trying to be polite and nice, to introduce us to, the polite side of God. He says, you've seen me, you've seen the Father, which means any idea you could have of God that is unlike me is not God. I've come to introduce Him.
Such a good word.
He says, see me in my parables. See me in the Father running to embrace the prodigal. Religion felt so much more comfortable with the other brother. And yet Jesus comes and He almost makes the other brother, He makes him look ridiculous. But isn't it amazing how the Father has exactly the same heart towards both sons?
Yes. Such a good
He shows the same courtesy. There's no different courtesy to the other brother. He says, my son, you've always been with me, and all that I have is yours. This is still the Father's heart. Because remember, when James discovers Him in the resurrection, John 7:5 says that not one of Jesus' brothers believed in Him. That's John 7 verse 5. Not one of his brothers believed in Him. Can you imagine that? Growing up in a family. He is the Messiah, by the way. I mean, the whole book's about Him. But for 30 years, he grows up in obscurity when he's in his ministry, I mean, that first miracle did it for them for a while, you know. My son, our brother, turned the water into wine. But they did something that really destroyed his reputation with his family. Remember in the temple, when he plaited the whip, and in that same chapter, John 2:19, he talks about destroying this temple. And in 3 days I will raise it up. And they could not quite marry the offense that they took to the promise, the Messiah, in a person that is so close to them. And then Paul tells us how in 1 Corinthians 15, how Jesus appeared to several individuals, and at one time to more than 500. And then he also appeared to James, his brother, one of them who did not believe in him. And what happened when James discovered his brother Jesus? It's in 1 Corinthians 15, there in the beginning of 1 Corinthians 15. When James discovers his brother in the resurrection, he discovers the face mirrored of his true birth. And then he writes, he says, every good and perfect gift comes from above. I mean, you could go and study those little words and just explore every good, perfect gift. That's rather inclusive. It's all inclusive. Comes from above. Anuthen is the Greek word. Same word that John uses in John chapter 3 when Jesus speaks to Nicodemus and he says to him, unless a man is anuthen, born from above, he would have no appetite for spiritual things. He would just be happy to live in this animal suit, this skin suit. But there is a hunger in man. There is a drive in man that wants to touch God, that wants to become so acquainted with his Maker, that there is a resonance. There is a place where this word becomes so much bigger than my best theology. It becomes a moment of resonance, so that with unveiled faces we may gaze upon the glory of God. But this time not as in a wonderfully defined doctrinal philosophy, but as in a mirror, where we discover that we are his glory. And the metamorphe takes place, a change that I'm not trying to manipulate with my most quality decision, my most improved willpower driven choices that I make. But it's an awakening of glory. In our walks the past 2 days in the forest, it was just such a beautiful thing to witness the spring, the season. Cannot reverse the season. It's there. The flowers are blossoming. They're breaking out of their hidings. And they display with great boldness their beauty. The awakening of our hearts to the glory of God is the most inevitable, most amazing, most all-consuming reality of our lives. We have been introduced through the gospel, the good news, to the absolute truth about ourselves. We are not called to try and love worthless objects, just so that we can be polite, so that maybe we qualify to be accepted in our pursuit to be nice to others. But when we discover that our Maker has always known us, and he has had no other agenda, there's no shadow due to change with him. hidden motive in God's mind. He doesn't even want to use us.
Such a good word.
I remember how shocked someone was one day when I told them, that God doesn't have a plan for your life. He says, because your life is His plan. Isn't that a most amazing discovery? That here I am, and my life is His plan. What He has in you knows no limits. So He encourages us to discover ourselves in His resurrection. He references us, not in our natural birth, but in His resurrection. No wonder Peter writes. Can you imagine Peter writing? Never mind writing intelligent conversation. Here he goes, 1 Peter 1. He's just starting to write. He says, 1 Peter 1 verse 3. He says, hey, we have been born anew when Jesus was raised from the dead. You cannot reference the new birth with any greater reality than the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Finally, what Paul saw by revelation arrested Peter's conversation. And Paul just heard Hosea write it. Hosea, 800 years before Christ, wrote in Hosea chapter 6 verse 2, after 2 days He will revive us. One would have thought that Hosea, the messianic prophet, would just talk about the third day resurrection of the Messiah. But Hosea sees the greater picture. And he says, after 2 days, He will revive us. On the third day, He will raise us up. We are co-resurrected, co-birthed in the resurrection. And so when we discover ourselves there, our minds are metamorphosis, is the Greek word. Beholding, as in a mirror, with unveiled faces, as in a mirror, the glory of the Lord. The trophy of His triumph is us, unveiled in Him. Metamorphosis takes place. He says we are changed into His likeness. The word metamorphe, 2 Greek words. Meta means together with, and morphe comes from the root word meros, which means form. Do you have something I could write with here? Here we go. Just for your reference, I'll just write it there. The word now is in 2 Corinthians 3:18. Where Paul writes that we are with unveiled faces beholding. The veil was referenced in verse 15. He says, wherever the law is read, wherever Moses is read, the same veil remains. Because in the context of 2 Corinthians 3, Paul speaks about these two glories. The glory of the flesh, the word glory in the Greek doxa comes from the word dokeo, which means opinion. I'll just write that down as well. Just so you can... The word doxa is in Greek, it's translated glory, but it comes from the word dokeo, which means opinion, intent, design. So, Paul says that we are changed from glory to glory. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18. Where are we changed from glory to glory? In our perception of what the mirror reveals. And what does the mirror reveal? The glory of God. Mm-hmm. God's opinion. God's idea of you. You see, religion kept us so occupied with our attempts to define God. Our faith does not define Him. His faith defines us. Mm-hmm. God is not our idea. We are His idea. So the glory of God is the idea of God. And now I'm beholding the idea of God as in a mirror. Not as in a display window. In the mirror I translated verse 18. I said the days of window shopping are over. We don't have to waste another day to claim a promise. Because every promise already claimed me. So here we are. Discovered in His embrace. Where we've been all along. The heart of God. I mean, the prodigal's father didn't, struggle within himself to try and be a good dad now, and he'll just be polite, He won't scold the child too much. He'll welcome him in tonight, and then tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, he'll be in his office, and they'll just get the books to balance again. It's so unlike God. That's so typical religion. God comes running. Because you've always been his doxa, his idea. Jesus is God's mind made up about you.
Wow, such a good word. It really is just, wow.
You don't ever have to doubt God's idea again, because the veil has been removed. John chapter 1 says the law came through Moses. Remember chapter 2 Corinthians 3 verses before 18? Verse 15 says wherever Moses is read, the veil remains. The law came through Moses. John chapter 1. But grace and truth came through Jesus. So let's not be confused. Because now with unveiled faces, what removed the veil then? The incarnation. The Word made flesh. Yet God, the invisible God, steps into our world, not only to divide our history for all eternity into a before Christ and after Christ, but to forever engage our minds with our true origin. Because we have forgotten what manner of people we are, remember? James chapter 1, he says we may gaze into this wonderful mirror that reflects the face of our birth, but then we go away because we have reason to. We feel justified in, I've had so many contradictions and temptations, so what I'd better do is just go back into my old way of seeing myself. That's where you go to when you go away from what the Word says. I just go back to my old mindset. The ugly duckling felt so comfortable with this old mindset, so it's really very positive, this swan language and all. But sure, it's going to take a lot of facelifts. And so we just slip back into the old frame of mind. And immediately I forget what manner of man I am. But God doesn't. So when the veil is removed, eternity steps into our time, clothed in human form. Colossians 1:15 says that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. God can never, for all eternity again, be reduced to invisible.
Ooh, that's
because
so
he's
good.
displayed incarnate. The man Jesus Christ forever celebrates incarnate God, Emmanuel. God can never again be God without man. Emmanuel. And now we with unveiled faces are beholding not just a glimpse, but gazing, engaging thought. You see, thought combines with thought. If we can Bluetooth between our devices, and we think, that's smart. God's smarter still. You are the God kind by design. You are so God compatible you cannot help it. You are so faith compatible. You are so wired for His Word to be overwhelmed with His thoughts. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2:13, he says we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit. And then he uses the Greek word combining Spirit with Spirit. There's a romance that takes place. And heart to heart echoes and resonates. And life ignites. Beholding, gazing upon the glory of the Lord. His doxa, His original opinion, His blueprint thought, His authentic thought, clothed in flesh, but not as in a display window. Because Jesus did not come as an example for you, but of you. We're talking mirror language here, not display window theology. The hour has come. The greatest moment where eternity marries time and is revealed in human form, ordinary human form. No wonder Paul writes in Galatians 1 and tells us about his gospel. He says it was when it pleased the Father to separate me from my mother's womb, separate me from my natural birth, my ID as great-grandson of Benjamin. It pleased him to reveal sonship in me, his son in me, in order that I may declare him, not amongst the nations. So many of our translations, our popular English translations, become so uncomfortable and so nervous with certain Greek words. So we make them say what they do not say. And we say, well, some translations even dare say that God revealed his son in me. Many say he revealed his son to me, because we're more comfortable with it. It's more historic, you can just... But the Greek says in me, in order that I may proclaim him, not amongst the nations, in the nations. I'll be wasting my time to look for a treasure if it's not there. I'm so glad that the woman who lost the coin, lit the lamp in the house, because that's where it was lost. Sincere seeking is not it. It's seeking where it is, in order to declare him in the nations. So now we are beholding the intent, the original, authentic idea of God, clothed in human form. Jesus did not arrive on planet Earth in a Superman suit. He did not come in some angelic body. His passport to planet Earth was his mother's womb. A body exactly like ours. He vindicates our design. He proves that God did not make a mistake when he made your flesh. One DNA strand in your 75 trillion contains 3 billion individual characters. Now we go like goosebumpy when we talk terabyte language. I mean, we're going megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes. God says it's nothing. One of your 75 trillion cells, every single one, carries a DNA code, the script that God wrote when he gathered you together in your mother's womb. Do you know what the difference is between 1 million seconds and 1 billion seconds?
Yeah.
12 days and 32 years. So if you have 3 billion individual characters in one of your DNA strands, that's 3 billion times, it's 32 years times 3. It means you'll be 96 years old if all you did was count individual characters in one of my single DNA strands. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And you have 75 trillion of them. Million seconds, 12 days. Billion seconds, 32 years. A trillion seconds, 30,000 years. Plus. I've stopped counting. And here we are, beholding the glory of God. Not in another spectacular horizon, and a fantastic sunset, and a beautiful moment in nature, but in human form, where the fullness of deity comfortably dwells. Not as in an undersized shoe where you have to curl your toes. You bought the shoes, they don't really fit, but they look good. So you've got to walk funny. We think that's God. God will just kind of just hold his breath and sneak into human form and try and just endure this confined space. No. Eternity dwells within you. When Paul sees this in Romans 1 and verse 19, he says, whatever can be known of God is manifest in man. Whatever can be known of God is manifest in man. We're talking incarnation language here. We're not talking God going into plan B mode. No, the heavens cannot declare him. But human form certainly does. God cannot be more articulate more visible than what he is in the Incarnation. Colossians 1:15. Jesus is the image of the invisible God. And now Colossians 2:9 would have been wonderful in its own right. But had it not been for verse 10, we would remain spectators, window shoppers. Oh, to be like Jesus. More and more. No? Verse 10, Colossians 2 verse 10 says, and we are complete in Him. In Him, we discover our completeness. I often see this picture on Facebook, where they have this kitten or this cat sitting in front of a mirror and there's a lion reflecting in the mirror. That is not the truth. I mean, can you imagine the facelifts before this kitten will remotely begin to resemble the lion? That's religion. You've got to try and just, get yourself there. Fake it until you make it. You won't. So quit your efforts. It'll never happen. Imagine the cat having to increase its volume until you could remotely sound like a roar. That's religion. It'll keep you engaged in the wrong mold. You are what you are to begin with. God had to deal with our top 10 inches.
Yeah.
Because we have forgotten, remember? The ugly duckling does not see a potential swan. That would qualify religion. Jesus says, if you continue in my word, you will know the truth. What does it mean to continue in Jesus' word? Does it mean I have to memorize all the red letters in the Bible? He is the eternal Logos, the eternal thought of God. He is the idea of God expressed in human form. He is what the prophets are all about. He is what Scripture is all about. Jesus says, you take Scripture to its conclusion and you'll discover me. And if you discover me, you'll discover you. You continue in my word, you will know the truth. The truth about what? The truth about you. The truth about you. And he says, whom the truth sets free. Whom the Son sets free. I cannot divorce sonship from truth. Because the truth about me is sonship. Is sonship. We are his offspring. There is no other parent of the human race but the living God. The diabolos, the devil, in the Greek diabolos, through the fall, that fallen mindset that mankind seemed to have inherited from Adam, is the father of lies. There is no truth. You can scrutinize the devil. There is no truth in him. He's the father of lies. And here the father of truth is revealed. Isaiah calls him the everlasting Father. And he's talking about Emmanuel, about the image and likeness of God revealed in sonship. And here in the Son we discover the echo of the Spirit of God crying, Abba, Father, in my voice, echoing my authentic Genesis, my beginning. I am his offspring. And now with unveiled faces, we are beholding together the dokeia, the doxa, the dokeia of God as in a mirror. As in a mirror. You're in. As in a mirror. And what happens in this gaze? A metamorphe. Meta, I've said it's 2 words. Meta plus the word meros is where we get the word metamorphosis. What is the English word? Metamorphosis. It's a Greek word. It speaks of a radical transformation. But it really is something that happens when truth is encountered. The ugly duckling encounter truth in the reflection of the swan. And what happened? Truth wins. I mean, there can be seasons where the ugly duckling feels more comfortable with the old ugly duckling mindset. But even though it believes a lie for the rest of its existence, it's still a swan. What a waste to live a lie. Why were the most labeled sinners in society so irresistibly attracted to Jesus? Did they see in him a new, compromised idea of themselves? No, they saw the truth. They said, hey, we lived a lie. What I lived until yesterday was a lie. I've encountered the truth. And the truth is the most attractive influence that man's mind could ever engage with. Truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Just let it loose. It will catch its own prey.
It's like a lion. I love it.
Metameros is the root of this word. Metamorphosis. This change that happens has got no hint of faking it until I make it in it. This is the truth that connects with my knowing. Because whatever can be known of God is manifest in man. This is still this word. You'll find it in 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18. I've got notes on it in the mirror translation of 2 Corinthians 3:18. So we are metameros from doxa to doxa. From glory to glory. Just before I go there, let me just give you the opposite of this word metameros, because it's got a very interesting opposite. The opposite of the word metameros is ha. It's a word that begins with ha, and again meros. You know what we've translated this word as in the Bible? One of the most translated and most preached words in the Bible? Sin. Hamartia. Without form. Ha is without. Negative. Ha. We have lost our true form. Here. This is the ugly duckling. I'm just an ugly duckling. I'm just a wrecked sinner. No, you're not. God didn't, out of pity, send Jesus. God's a businessman. He sold all that he had and he bought the field because he knows the treasure that lies hidden in that soil is worth it. He has always known you, remember? He has not forgotten who you are, even though you may have forgotten who you are. God was not hiding from Adam and Eve in the garden. The shepherd did not forsake the sheep. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Metameros instead of ha-meros. This explains Isaiah 53. While we esteemed him not, he was like without form. He didn't look like a man. He looked more like a slaughtered animal. Because he took on himself our deformed minds. So that he could rescue his image and likeness, his true form in us. So we are changed from glory to glory. The English word from can be confusing. Some translations would say that we are changed, we are being changed from one degree of glory to another degree of glory to another degree of glory, as if this change will indeed take a lifetime. The problem with that interpretation is that we could easily find ourselves in the same treadmill environment of Israel. 100% rescued, freed from Pharaoh, but trapped in a lie that they believe about themselves. We are grasshoppers, and there are giants out there. And so we've engaged with this mindset for centuries that well, it's going to be an eventual change. But in the meantime, we're just going to have to just use whatever hammer and chisel, God employs to slowly but surely get rid of what does not look like the horse. No. This is much more dynamic. What a waste if you are a true son, a true swan, for better words. What a waste to live another day in the old mindset. How long will it take to metanous, which is another word that we look at during this weekend, I hope. Metanoia. What a waste to live a day in a lie once you know the truth. Shall we break now, or can we just continue, brother? I'm going to. I just want to ask. It's 7 o'clock now.
Let's go 10 more minutes.
Okay.
And then we'll take a break. And at 7:30, I think we'll have more people join us.
Sure. Okay, so I just want to sum up and conclude this thought. So here we are confronted, as in a mirror, with God's doxa. Remember what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 3:18? Now, with unveiled faces, we are beholding the doxa, the dokeo, the idea of God as in a mirror. So what happens when I see what God sees in the mirror? I see me the way God sees me. Because we are talking mirror language here. We're not talking display window. The days of window shopping are over. You never need to claim another promise. The promise has already claimed you. So here we are engaged with God's idea. And in that moment, there is a metamorphosis that takes place. Together with form, the original form, the truth about me frees me. The hameros, the sin, the mind that kept me trapped in a distorted me. I'm just a grasshopper. There are giants out there. That lie is forever defeated in the Incarnation, in the Word made flesh. So now we can continue, and that word continue leads us to the conclusion of the prophetic word. You continue in my word. You'll discover that the whole book's about me. And in that discovery, you'll discover that I'm all about you. And in this metameros moment, I'm changed from doxa to doxa. Now, the English word from in the Greek can be one of two. It can be apo, or it can be ek. Most Greek prepositions indicate direction. In Romans 1:17, we read about the revelation of the gospel. The core secret of the gospel is a revelation of the righteousness of God. What God did right, not what Adam did wrong. What God did right in Christ is the core of the gospel. It's the good of the good news. What God did, how God succeeded to rescue His image in me. That's what we're talking about. And then Paul says it's from faith to faith. And again he uses the word from. But in Romans 1, verse 17, the Greek word is the word ek. Ek always denotes, points to origin, to source. Remember Hebrews 12 says that Jesus is the author and the finisher of faith. Faith has only one authentic origin and one authentic conclusion. Jesus is it. Jesus is what God believes about you. Ephesians 4 says there is only one faith. And this one faith is what God believes. Not what we believe or think we know about Him. But what He always knows about us. So it is from faith to faith. This is now Romans 1 verse 17. But we are talking 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18. And here Paul uses the word apo. Now apo sometimes means from in that sense. But most of the time, apo means away from. Away from. Now we're talking two glories here. 2 Corinthians 3 is about two glories. In Isaiah 40 we read about the glory of the flesh. All flesh is like grass. And its glory is like a flower. The problem with a flower is it doesn't last. It has a sell-by date. So anything that the flesh could boast in is so fragile, is so temporal, is a moment of glory, and then it's history. Lydia's cousin was the high jump record holder in all of Africa for 21 years. But it does not mean that for 21 years he reached the same height. It also does not mean that because I was married to his cousin, that I could jump any higher. And we so often reduced our ideas of God as this amazing idea God had, but it was completely wrecked through Adam. And Jesus was just a once-off. He's a wonderful historic reference, but let's all wait for our own death, because his death didn't really do it. We'd have to wait for our own death to one day in heaven. Then we'll be transformed in a twinkling of an eye. And won't it be wonderful there? But oh, how miserable it's here. Then God made a mistake to put us here in the first place. He should have just kept us there, because we remember we come from above. Listen, that's our origin. We began there. So if all God wanted was to get us into heaven, why didn't he just keep us there? So here we are on planet Earth, and God says, I am in covenant with this planet. He says, as truly as I live, all the earth, every nook and cranny shall be flooded with the knowledge of my glory. There is no absence of God's glory on planet Earth. You come for a walk one afternoon with us in the forest. We're going to show you our own forest. We don't need to. This earth is flooded with glory. We have explored a fraction of the oceans. We are bombarded. My favorite channel on TV is the Planet Earth. It is just so... I'd much rather watch that than TV, and please don't record this. But here we are. Wow, God, you're on display. And then God says, I want to mirror me in you. I want to mirror me in you. I want you to see that in the backdrop. In this, I've set the stage on this planet to flood the earth with the knowledge of my glory, my idea, my opinion, my likeness revealed in you. God is not embarrassed about your body. He redeemed his design in the obedience of one man. Jesus came and he vindicated. He proved that God did not make a mistake when he made you. So the word from here is the word up, away from my old idea of me under the law of works and performance, and how I could measure up to someone else's expectation. And I've discovered the authentic idea, the original me, the true swan that frees me to be me, not the fake me that's trying to become a better duck, but the truth. And he took his death on that cross to bring finality, closure to the old idea of me. And he took his powerful resurrection to introduce a new birth of the human race. We are confronted with a new birth that in God's logic makes more sense than any other argument under the law of works and performance. So faith comes. And what does faith do? Faith ignites God's idea in me. And this metamorphosis takes place. And I'm introduced to me the way that he has always known me. And now I can discover my neighbor. Because the gospel gives context to who you are and who your brother is. Because he is not ashamed to call us brethren. Because we come from the same. And there the word from in Hebrews 2:11 is the word ek. We come from the same Father, the same source. We bless you.